Hey guys, here today with another Shirogorov knife video. Today we have in front of us the Quantum NL. Now the Quantum NL is part of the Ursus lineup. Ursus, a lot of people were really confused about what this meant, if the model of this knife was the Ursus. Well, Ursus is really Shirogorov's new kind of entry-level lineup, kind of symbolized by this whole naming scheme here, of which the Quantum NL is the first knife in this lineup. Now, entry-level folders are not anything new to the Shirogorov lineup. We've had knives such as the Neon Zero, the more premium offering, and then the counterpart, the Neon NL. That Neon NL was not part of the Ursus lineup and still is not. That knife, to the best of my knowledge, is still being produced. But what really is differentiating the Ursus lineup from the other knives is the fact that these knives have machine ground blades. Now, this may come as a surprise to many people. If you take a look at Shirogorov knives, you can see the grinds are very, very symmetrical. And this is, of course, something that Shirogorov has honed all over the years of making knives, well over a decade now. If you take a look at many knives, this is a custom, but you can see here that the plunge and the primary bevel here, this is all done by hand, regardless of if it's a custom division, a production knife, up until the point of the Ursus lineup being released. All Shirogorov knives have been done, all the blades have been hand ground. There's a jig. There are very, very few people in the workshop who are qualified to grind the blades, but they are indeed ground by hand. Actually, I probably want to drop a link in the description there to the Instagram where they actually show them using the jig to make the blades, which I think is really cool. But anyways, the Ursus lineup here is a machine ground blade, which again is helping to reduce the costs and is also giving an opportunity to have very distinct knives that are part of this lineup. The Quantum NL here, as you can see, is using, has an inlay material here. This is rosewood. There is another version that had come out very recently in black G10 as well. So very unique materials being used here as well, kind of a nice fresh opportunity to do something different. That's kind of a brief introduction to the Ursus lineup. Let's go ahead here and actually take a look at the knife. And a lot of this video is going to be a comparison to the more premium Quantum, and with the new recent Quantum Gen 2 that has come out. Unfortunately, I haven't done a video on that one yet. I do know what it's like, so I'll probably be comparing it more to the Quantum Gen 2 based on what I know about it. Since, again, I haven't done a review video on one, but I have handled one. And that one really makes the most sense since the Quantum Gen 1 is pretty much discontinued. But anyways, let's go ahead after that lengthy introduction and take a look at the knife real quick. Really nothing out of the ordinary here. The knife is Quantum sized, which means it is also F95 sized, which means it is bigger than the Neon. So you can see the blade sizes are exactly the same. We take a look at the handle and the blade. You can see here we have just a little bit over 4 inches of cutting length. For the overall length here, you can see we're looking at about 8 3/4. And closed, you can see we're looking at just about 5 inches closed. Now, taking a look at the blade here, you can see that we have a much more simplified blade profile than what we see on the original Quantum and the new Quantum Gen 2. The most distinct difference you can see here is the lack of the fuller, which is above, right above where the flats start on the blade. And instead we have kind of a high flat ground blade here with more traditional style flats. that you would see like on an F95. The jimping is still retained, however. It is still the same type of jimping, quite functional. And I very much do like this jimping compared to what we see on the new F95s and the Neon Zero, for example. The blade steel here is Chromax PM. This is also in 3.5 millimeter blade stock. This blade stock is also what is on the Quantum Gen 2, and it is slimmer. They are both slimmer than the original Quantum Gen 1, which had the normal 4 millimeter blade thickness. So it really does look like Shirogorov is trying to migrate over to 3.5 millimeters as the main stock thickness for their knives. About Chromax PM, it looks like this knife actually right here, the Quantum NL Ursus, is really the only folder that's using the steel. It seems to be coming from a German company called Lohmann, and based on what Shirogorov had advertised the steel as, it seemed to be kind of an upgrade to LMAX. However, when the composition was actually released, it seemed like the steel, based on its composition, and again, I am no steel snob or expert, so don't quote me on this exactly. Feel free to do your own research. It looks that the carbon content and vanadium content is significantly less than on LMAX, which should result in a blade that isn't actually as wear resistant or tough. A lot of people are really hoping that this would be, LMAX Plus, since LMAX is quite a very tough steel and a great choice for a everyday use folder. But it looks like that is not what this is. It's still a very decent steel. It looks like Shirogorov is running around 62, 63 HRC. So it should be fine for everyday tasks, but unfortunately, it isn't kind of an LMAX killer as it seems Shirogorov is advertising it as. I'm very curious to hear their statements on this, or if they're using some kind of a special blend that is not what is being issued by Lohmann with the composition. But again, that is something that people have been talking about. One thing to note is that the blade finish on the Quantum NL is quite a bit rougher than on the normal stonewash finish that you see on the more premium Shirogorov knives. And this goes to even the blade finishes on the the Neon NL, the F95 NL, the non-MRBS version, kind of the more entry-level knives. The finish on the Ursus is actually quite rough. This one actually has had some work done to it to kind of improve the finish. Unfortunately, I really wish I had done the video before to give you kind of an example of it. But even with this kind of refinishing of the blade here, you can see that it's still, well, this knife is dirty. So really bad example. The finish, I don't have a production knife, unfortunately, but the finish on this Neon is pretty much the same as a production. And you can see here, it's just not as smooth. The stonewash, the tumbling is quite a bit rougher. It's just not as refined. And that is something that I would expect from a knife that is at a lower price point and probably has less fit and finishing done to it compared to the more premium offerings. Now, another thing to note too is you can see here that there's a slight curve to the plunge here. I can only assume this is part of the machine grinding process. Again, it feels really bad to compare this to a full custom, as you would expect a full custom to have even more excellent finishing, but I promise you the production knives also have a straight plunge grind here. But you can see here that all the plunges being done by hand are actually very straight. If you take a look at the Quantum Gen 1 or Gen 2, if any of you guys have those, you can see your plunge lines are straight because it is ground by hand. The machine ground ones have a slight curve to them. So very interesting, the fact that you would think having it be done by machine, you could have a straight plunge grind, but it looks like that is not the case, or it's just harder to have the machine do that. Moving on to the handle here, you can see the titanium is finished. I don't really notice a difference in the finishing of the titanium. Still very nice, uniform gray, darkened titanium finish here. One thing that I do notice is that we have a normal size, or the old style pivot screw, which has pretty much been eliminated from the production knife lineup in favor of the newer large version of the screws. I'm not sure if this is them wanting to use hardware that they already have. I imagine at some point they would run out of it and only have the newer large ones, but it looks like the Ursus lineup is using these older screw heads, which I think is also very interesting as well. The Neon NL and I believe the F3 SRBS, kind of the other budget entry-level knives that are not part of the Ursus lineup, are also using the smaller pivot screw, so for what it's worth. Very nice milling that's inset here. You know, I've talked about this in recent videos, how the milling, you know, to kind of make it easier to finish, they kind of leave some milling lines here, since having these kind of, you know, silk milling really helps hide those imperfections. You can see here that there is just 2 lines being left here and the rest of it is flat. Very interesting finishing technique here. I'm not sure if that's to kind of accentuate the step down in the handles here, but very interesting design choice and something that I don't think is very noticeable from far away. You really have to get up close to see that. But yes, the handles are indeed slightly contoured in the sense that there is a step here. It's not 3D contour, there are no curves to it, but there is kind of this cut here on the top left and the bottom right corner, very commonly seen on other knives as well. Here we have the rosewood inlay. Like all other Shirogorov inlays, it stands proud of the handles by just a bit to kind of fill the grip in your hand. Very nice wood piece here. Some people, you know, like the grain finish here. I actually think it looks quite nice. I am more partial to the G10 version, however, but I don't think this wood looks bad at all. But of course, it can kind of depend on your example and the exact look of the grain here. Moving on to the back side here, you can see that the lock bar area is much more simplified, especially up here in the front with the near the lock bar insert screw than the Gen 1 Quantum, or the Gen 2 actually. This is one area that I think really kind of, you can really tell the difference in the amount of milling and detail involved. And I definitely do think the original Quantum design looks better in that regards. And you can see here that the clip is a very similar clip to what we see on the Quantum, on the other Quantums as well. Much larger milling here. The width here you can see kind of narrows as it goes up to the top. So the clip design is slightly different here in the finishing textures, and also the textures here in the lock bar insert I believe are slightly different as well. The clip does contact kind of a 45-degree angle here towards the top of the lock bar relief cutout, like the original Quantum. I think it's just a very slick and integrated design of how the clip contacts the handle. So it was nice to see that being done here as well on the Quantum NL. Now, taking a look at the rear here, these are some very significant changes. Of course, the more entry-level knives do not have backspacers. The F95 NL, the Neon NL, for example, have standoffs, and the Quantum NL is no different here. You can see we have a very nice polished titanium standoff here. That's kind of this triangular shaped design. Very, very nice and very unique piece here, actually. I'm surprised that they actually want to go with something that is so unique to specifically this model. There really is no other usage of this exact kind of standoff design other than on the Quantum NL. Like the F95, we also have a lanyard hole. Probably should have discussed that. I personally think it's a pretty cool design. Some people really don't like that it's asymmetrical. I actually really do. I like how it's kind of smartly integrated into the design. Now, of course, with the back spacer, people really like how Shirogorovs have that lanyard hole hidden, but I really like how they took the time, or Sergey took the time to design this and do some nice chamfering here, do something other than kind of just punch a hole through the handles. Lastly, here you can see we have these pins here. If you guys know about the Neon NL, this is something that you have seen before. These are 1mm tungsten pins, and there's 3 of them, and it kind of acts as a guard so you don't kind of hit your finger on the tip of the blade here and kind of, you know, inadvertently slice yourself. nice design, feature, very unique. Some people really don't like the pins. I think they're a cool addition. Very, very interesting. These are tungsten pins as well, so kind of a very unique material too. Now, like other knives here in the kind of entry-level lineup, in that we don't have any internal milling here. We also have the SRBS pivot system, which you can see here, which looks kind of like a sun. Now, a lot of people are really wondering, you know, how smooth is SRBS? Is MRBS really a worthwhile upgrade? And to that, it really depends on a lot of things, you know. With the production knives, people always ask me, you know, what about custom divisions? What about rollers? Well, custom divisions are quite smooth, but I actually really think it's the satin blade flats that really contribute to that smoothness. With MRBS, you know, the knife is very smooth, but, you know, since the detent ball is running on those stonewash flats, you're really going to feel the detent ball kind of rolling across that stonewash finish, and it can cause a little bit of noise. SRBS has, of course, that same feeling, because the knives that have SRBS have blade flats that are not sand finished, they're stonewashed. Other than that, I honestly really can't tell the difference. I would say MRBS definitely has more lateral stability. If you were to put load on the blade, I definitely think that MRBS would be able to handle that better. This is, you know, proven by the workshop through their testing. They have pictures and a thread on USN forums regarding this, and also comparing it to roller bearings as well. But in terms of the actual smoothness, I would say that SRBS is totally fine, and MRBS is more of a kind of a technical kind of achievement, and also that lateral stability as well, which really doesn't factor too much into the whole smoothness aspect of the knife. So I really like how smooth these are. This particular example, especially having the blade have a light refinish, is quite smooth, and I would expect that you know, if you were to get one of these, the smoothness is not a problem. That has to do with the Shirogorov assembling the knife, and they spend as much care into assembling the knife and making sure that it works properly as, you know, you're getting that in the entry-level folders, you're getting that in the premium level folders, custom division, and SRBS full customs. So I honestly don't think it's anything to even worry about, and it's something that you probably won't even be able to tell the difference between MRBS. That is my opinion on it, and that's also my experience as well. One other thing that I find very interesting about this is that actually taking a look here, the overall design of the Quantum NL doesn't really strike me so much as being a Quantum overall, and I don't know if that's because of the lack of the fuller, the lock bar cutout, and the lack of a back spacer. I'm not really too sure, but overall, despite liking the knife from a technical perspective and still really being impressed with the price point that they were able to put these out at, and the overall mechanics of the knife, something to me just doesn't really feel like it's still the same as the original Quantum. And because of this, I really can't fault the knife. If this was the Quantum that had come out, I would have you know, felt really, I would have been really excited about the knife. But really, having the Quantum kind of come out, I've noticed that the Quantum NL has seen the most drastic changes to the overall design as compared to, say, an F95 Zero versus the F95 NL SRBS version, or the Neon NL compared to the more premium Neon Zero. I really feel that the Quantum NL has gotten the biggest changes, and really the biggest gap between the kind of budget entry-level model and the more premium model. Perhaps it's because the Quantum, the MRBS Quantum, has 3D milling. That was a really big thing. We really don't get many production folders from the workshop that have 3D milling, but you know, with the drastic blade shape difference, with that lack of the fuller and the lack of the 3D contoured milling and the lack of, you know, many elements in the milling itself on the handle, I really just have to say that there is kind of that disconnect here, and it's a big gap compared to again the other model knives that I mentioned, where there's a budget model and a more premium model. Really trying to wrap this up succinctly. If you're looking for that Shirogorov budget model, I actually would recommend probably the Neon NL. A lot of people really like the Quantum. If you like the rosewood, I think this would be great for you. It's just I can't really shake that feeling of the huge gap between the Quantum NL and the original Quantum. But of course, I'm very curious to see what the workshop is going to do for the Ursus lineup and what other models they're going to come out with. Perhaps we might see some other existing models, such as the Stellar, come up in an Ursus model or an F95. And if they do, I'm actually very curious to see where the existing kind of entry-level knives end up. Will the Neon NL be discontinued in favor of a Neon NL Ursus model? It'll be very interesting to see how that happens, or if that even happens at all. But anyways, at this point, just kind of talking about things that haven't happened yet. This is pretty much it for the knife. Again, very, very nice EDC carry, but there are some changes compared to the original Quantum design. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. This one ran a bit long as always, but I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time.